That's something I never thought I'd see up there, I think. First of all, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. 25 years. Sometimes it seems to me like 25 days. Oregon was such a different place 25 years ago. I'd just been here about 5 years when this whole thing got started, and there was no Facebook, there was no YouTube, there were no laptops. In fact, 25 years ago, when I was traveling around in Eastern Oregon for the Oregonian, I actually had a notebook and one of those pencils, because it rained all the time in Oregon, and you could write, and it wouldn't run in the rain. That was equipment for the Oregonian in 1988. And how much has changed, and yet how much, in so many ways, is just the same. The biggest difference, I suppose, in 1988 is Oregon really still was a timber economy. This state lived and breathed timber. Everywhere you went, you could smell it, and you could touch it, and you could feel it, and you could sense all the threat, you know, that was facing the timber economy. And as you all know, that was really the roots of this whole Cycle Oregon thing. A handful of us coming back from visits to those small timber towns where so much seemed threatened, where economic dislocation was clearly going to bring social dislocation and unemployment and all the things that come behind that. That was when we sort of first put together the idea of the very first Cycle Oregon ride. And we said, let's go out and let's spend some time in these small towns, and let's at least show them that at least for a week, you know, we can think about them and we can care and we can do something. Really what we were all about was trying to sort of bring some capital from the urban environment into the rural environment. And we knew that we were a bike ride, you know, we weren't a bank. But still we thought, at least if we can go out there, you know, we can pour as much of our beer money as possible in 1 week, and as much of our Advil money as possible in 1 week, you know, into these small communities. And that's how the whole thing got started. And that's how the whole thing just grew. At the end of that very first week, you know, we all dug our hands in our pockets, threw the change into a cowboy hat. That was the start of the Cycle Oregon Fund. And by year 3, we were making regular grants. You know, in addition to the money that all of you would spend in the communities when we rode through, we started to make grants to the communities that hosted us. And we'd put a new roof on the Grange Hall, or we'd put a new kitchen in the Elks Club. And we started to put park benches in the city park. And we started to buy football uniforms for high school teams. And everything grew, you know, each year after year, as more people would come and more people would sort of buy into the mission and share into the mission and care about the people of rural Oregon and want to be a part of this whole thing, the opportunities for us to do more good grow. So we started to make sort of slightly bigger and bigger grants, and we were able eventually to do some sort of pretty major projects that we all of us, you know, can take enormous pride in, I think. When we helped to preserve the cave, you know, at Fort Rock, the very first place where Oregonians ever lived in this remarkable part of the world. When we were able to help preserve the Round Barn in Harney County, the first great cathedral ever built in Oregon by the pioneers, you know, way out there on the Oregon desert. The work that we're doing to preserve the moraine up in Wallowa County, where we spent so many nights camping there at Wallowa Lake. The work that we did in Halfway, where we've been so many times, to help preserve the county fairgrounds there and give those back to the people. The work that we did bringing fish back to Diamond Lake, where we camped a couple of times. These are all sort of things that all of us can be immensely proud of, I think. And then, of course, there's one of the big ones that we've been working on now for almost 10 years, which is this notion that Oregon could become the first state in the union with a total network of state scenic bikeways, marked, maintained, marketed as a place where Oregonians and visitors can ride safely on bicycles from community to community all across the state. It really is wonderful that you've all helped make that possible, and the notion that you can ride, you know, on a state scenic bikeway around in Grant County or in Wallowa County, or even, of course, in the Willamette Valley from Portland to Eugene. That's really wonderful. But it still seemed to some of us at Cycle Oregon that there's something sort of missing, and there's something we could do beyond that. So as our 25th anniversary, we decided, instead of sort of looking back at all of that, why don't we look forward? And if we could imagine 25 years from now, what would the people sitting here at Tiger Woods like to look back on and say, look what we did. Those early guys, they were just doing these little itty-bitty things. We did this. You know, what would this be? And we thought about it for a while, all went along, you know, when you can't really get out and ride your bike. We got together and we thought, what would this be? And we decided, you know what, this would be if you could ride your bicycle from the Willamette Valley to the Pacific Ocean on a paved, off-road bicycle path. So, well, it's sort of a nice dream. It's an easy dream to applaud. And the ushers will now be moving around you with their collection baskets. So, but seriously, it's a dream that we thought all of us really could get behind. So what Cycle Oregon is announcing tonight as its 25th anniversary gift from all of you to the people of Oregon is we're putting up a $100,000 grant to begin the planning process for what actually will be a paved bicycle path linking the Willamette Valley and the Pacific Ocean. We know, of course, this is a big dream, but it's actually a dream we've been sort of dreaming about for at least a year, and we've been talking to people up and down the Oregon coast. We've been talking to lots of people here in the Valley, of course. We've talked to a lot of our friends in state government. We've talked to lots of folks in the Coast Range, and there are opportunities out there. There are, of course, historic trails that link the Valley and the ocean. There are hiking trails. There are some railroad rights of way that link the Valley and the ocean. So we think that the $100,000 grant really can sort of jumpstart what can be a remarkable project for all of us to engage in next year. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to walk over here and I'm going to show you what you all really came to hear tonight. Let me open with a traditional thank you. It's to all the people who really do make so much of this possible. And first, of course, is the sponsors, many of whom have been with us from the very beginning. First and foremost, I have to mention the Oregonian. As I mentioned, it was there that I was working 25 years ago. It made absolutely no sense from a marketing point of view or a business development point of view 25 years ago that the Oregonian would let me do this, but they did, and I will always be indebted to them for their support from the start. And second, the very first company that I turned to 25 years ago was a little Oregon company called Nike. Nike had nothing to do with bicycles, nothing to do with bicycling. This was, of course, I should mention, long before Lands or anything like that, long before this campus, long before the Armstrong building. But what we had, you know, was that love affair that Cycle Oregon was engendering with rural Oregon. And for Nike, of course, and for Phil Knight, the roots of Nike itself, in many ways, are right there in rural Oregon, in the Bowman Ranch near Fossil. So it took about 2 minutes for us to explain the Cycle Oregon idea to Phil Knight, and he backed us from the beginning, and he hasn't wavered in that from the very beginning. So again, please thank everyone here at Nike for everything they've done for us. And our third sponsor is our newest member of the Cycle Oregon family of sponsors. That's the law firm of Stoll Byrne in downtown Portland. As our economic existence has become much more complicated in recent years, of course, we've had much more call for legal services and legal advice. And Stoll Byrne stepped forward some years ago and offered to do all that for us. And they've been a terrific partner of ours, and we're delighted to have them in the family. And we're lots of things at Cycle Oregon, but of course, first and foremost, we remain a bicycle ride, and we couldn't possibly have been a bicycle ride and survived all this year without our friends at the Bike Gallery. Sometimes I still sort of wish that back in 1988, instead of a blood red Raleigh steel 10-speed, I'd bought an MGB and we'd done sports car Oregon. Would have been kind of fun. I'd still be driving the same MGB, and of course I'm on my 9th bicycle from the Bike Gallery, so you all know how that goes. So, And I want to thank, of course, our board of directors. They work all year long. They're a terrific group of people that I get to partner with. There are 7 of us on the board of directors who've been doing this for quite a while. And to celebrate our 25th anniversary, we've got 5 brand new directors joining us next Monday to launch some new age, new wave thinking as we go forward. And I want to thank, too, all of our volunteers, many of whom are here with us tonight, many of whom work on projects throughout the year. And mostly, of course, I want to thank you all, the writers, because without you, really, none of this could happen. Before I get to the details of where we're first going to ride this year, let me just quickly mention a couple of other things on which we're engaged. Cycle Oregon remains a leader in the movement for active transportation. There are now groups and organizations all across the state talking about this issue. It's a multi-pronged assault on everything from urban congestion and climate change to poor air quality and childhood obesity. And this spring in Salem, Cycle Oregon will host another Oregon Active Transportation Summit, and we'll bring together planners and public health officials from all across the state, all talking about our urban environments and how we can improve them to make them healthier and more sustainable for all. And as part of that rebranding of Oregon, we really do like to talk about Oregon now as the land bicycles dream about. So as part of that rebranding of Oregon, we introduced a few years back these license plates. You see Share the Road now popping up all across our state. I was actually out in Grant County just a couple of weekends ago, and I can't tell you how cool it feels to be driving, down Grant County in the middle of nowhere, 80 miles, out of John Day, and you come up behind a pickup truck, and I looked down and I noticed there's a Share the Road plate on the pickup truck in Grant County, so that feels pretty good. These are now the best-selling group plates in Oregon history, and all proceeds from the sales support our advocacy efforts. And finally, in August this year, we'll be hosting our annual Policy Makers Ride. This is the 9th time we've done this, and that's when we handpick 100 elected officials, traffic engineers, urban planners, and we force them on bicycles. And we take them out and about into the urban environments that they've planned and show them what it actually feels like to encounter or sometimes to endure urban planning on a bicycle. So much then for the context in which we do our work. Let's get on to the actual rides. You'll have the opportunity this year to join Cycle Oregon on not 1, not 2, but 3 major events. Our tour schedule opens on Saturday, June 16th, with the Ride for 2 Rivers. This event celebrates our partnership with 2 enduring friends of Cycle Oregon, the National Forest Foundation and the Community of Sisters. 100% of the proceeds of this ride will support restoration work on the Metolius River and on Waichus Creek, both part of the Forest Foundation's Treasured Landscapes campaign. The Metolius, of course, many of you know, is a wild and scenic river. Far lesser known is the Waichus, the creek that has only recently been rediscovered after years when unsustainable irrigation forced the river to dry up long before it actually reached the town of Sisters. Cycle Oregon this year is going to help bring the river back to Sisters. All the proceeds from this ride, thank you. All the proceeds from this ride will stay in the Sisters area, and the best part of all is that every dollar that we all raise will be matched by a dollar from the National Forest Foundation, giving riders twice the conservation bang for their buck. Our base in Sisters will be right here at the Five Pines Resort. And from there, we'll turn our attention, of course, to those Cascade Peaks. Our destination on this Saturday ride will be the summit of Mackenzie Pass. It's part of our partnership with the Oregon Department of Transportation. The old Mackenzie Highway will be closed to motor vehicles, and we will be plowing a bicycle path up through the snowbanks, giving us unprecedented access to one of the great vistas in the West. For those of you who haven't had the chance to do that yet, I encourage you to come out and do that. It really is a great day on a bicycle. The snowbanks towards the summit of Mackenzie Path average 12 to 14 foot in June. We plow an 8-foot path through them, and you have bikes going up and down both ways. Makes for a pretty exciting day on a bicycle. So. And it gets a little chilly up on top. 1 month later, in July, we'll stage our annual Cycle Oregon weekend. This summer, we're heading to the heart of the valley to enjoy 2 days of riding through the place the pioneers called the land at Eden's Gate. And you can see why they called it the land at Eden's Gate. Heart of the valley is, of course, a clue for all of you out there this evening who are Latin scholars. Heart, core, valley, vallis. So we'll be making our camp on the campus of Oregon State University in Corvallis. One thing we've learned through the years is that you all really do like dorm rooms. So we're all going back to school at OSU this summer. There'll be 2 days of rides out into the valley, and continuing our tradition of the weekend being family friendly, there'll be a kids camp with lots of fun for our young riders. Mostly, of course, again, a Cycle Oregon weekend tradition, there will be options for riders of all inclinations. On Saturday, 16th of July, from our base right here on the campus, we'll be offering rides of 11 miles, 36 miles, and 68 miles. Saturday morning, we'll ride out through a series of Christmas tree farms that line the western edge of the valley floor. And the short route that day loops down through Philomath on protected bike paths and country roads. The middle route circles down to the south, and more experienced riders, naturally, will set their sights on the nearest hill, which in this case means the Coast Range. The long route that day passes majestic Mary's Peak, enters the deep forest setting of Alsea Falls, and then returns via Alpine and Bell Fountain roads back down to the campus at OSU. On Sunday, we'll offer rides of 16 miles, 36 miles, or 66 miles, a second day of basking in all the bounty that is the Willamette Valley. Highlights on this Sunday ride will include the historic pioneer towns of Harrisburg and Brownsville, and a visit to one of the newest additions of Oregon's string of stunning state parks. That's the new park at Thompson's Mill. It's a weekend designed to indulge in all the glory that is indeed the Willamette Valley, the place so fertile, said the pioneers, that even its fence posts bear fruit. So here it is, the Cycle Oregon weekend, 2 days of riding through land about as pretty and land about as fertile as anywhere on earth. In July, naturally, as we ride the valley, the harvest will be in full swing. We might even be picking some of that fruit as we did last year. But the true harvest comes with that sense of connection we'll be forging again between urban and rural Oregon, between us and them. The bond to remind us all that we are indeed one Oregon. Well, so much for our summer training rides. Let's get to the meat of the matter. Where in September are we going to ride? Well, people often ask me, day in and day out, where are we going next year? How are we going about putting together our September tours? Each winter as we assemble these routes, it does indeed sometimes seem that Oregon affords too many riches, and we could indeed just spin the wheel. We could indeed just gamble. Let's see where it lands. Columbia Gorge, Snake River. But this is, after all, our 25th anniversary. And we wanted to make sure it was really special. So we set ourselves a couple. Well, actually, we set ourselves 3 criteria. 3 words. That's all we needed. Longer, higher, harder. So bear that in mind as this unfolds. Those of you who have ridden with me for some years know that I have a certain fondness for the high side. I have a certain fondness for the dry side. I have a certain fondness for that side of our state where the view stretches all the way to the sky. And so we went looking for a place to start where the view stretches all the way to the sky. We went looking for a high, dry, lonesome spot to start. And we found it right here, where the road runs clear to the horizon and where bicycles have all the room they could ever want. And so our 2012 Cycle Oregon Tour will begin right here in the very heart of lonesome roadland, right here in the town where they're still expecting Buffalo Bill Cody to show up on Saturday night. Apparently nobody in the room was there last Saturday night. Or somebody'd be saying, yes! But enough of all the teasing. Let me show you where the fun will indeed start. Here is the howling heart of beautiful downtown Bly, Oregon. Home of the Wolfpack? Some of you I know are wondering, where the heck is Bly, Oregon? Bly, Oregon is 44 miles east of Klamath Falls, and this is the opening. This is day one, the day we call High and Lonesome. Yeah. So, the veterans out there, I'm sure, already are thinking there is only one way that Jonathan would ever want to go from Bly, Oregon, and that's east. So I thought I'd throw a little change ball at you. And the truth is that we're going to turn our wheels first towards the west. But not for very long, because our goal this day is actually to strike north into the very heart of Oregon cowboy country, into that country where cattle really do have the right of way on the highway, and the views stretch so far your thighs will ache. And this is like day one. Riding through the land of the northern Paiutes, some of Oregon's early inhabitants, will roll through these high meadows filled with their lush vegetation, seamless carpets of wildflowers, as we begin the first challenge of the week, climbing towards the forested ridgelines, teeming with wildlife. And finally, we emerge in these deep upland forests where we pick up one of those classic Cycle Oregon one-lane Forest Service roads. It's a perfect, high, lonesome, dry start. One of the great joys each year, of course, of riding Cycle Oregon is the opportunity to bask in the raw expanse that is the American West. And this is indeed is one of those days on which to relish the splendid isolation. Here's the view on the afternoon of day one. It really is just you and your bike and Oregon spread all around you. And on then to our destination, the community of Silver Lake, where we'll take over the entire community, and we will indeed be camping on every square foot in town. So there it is. This is the opening day of our Cycle Oregon Week, Bly to Silver Lake. It's 70 miles. Perfect little day one climb when we find out who forgot to train. On then to day two. This is the day we call Marsh Madness. Our Sunday morning opens with stunning vistas of the Inland Empire. The empire where the whimsy of the road signs belies the raw majesty of the landscape. We'll ride this morning through a series of ranches tucked deep into those hollows like gophers hiding from the wind before we drop down into the stunning oasis that is Klamath Marsh. This is the morning that will give us all a whole new frame of reference for the notion of wide open spaces, as we'll ride in awe past the lily pads that stretch for miles in all directions. The only sound other than the hum of our rubber on the road will be the roar of the Klamath silence. And we're on our way now west again. We'll stop by another of those crown jewels of Oregon state parks. This is Collier State Park, with its breathtaking collection of vintage logging equipment, and even more breathtaking in the dry side, this glorious green, shady oasis right by the river for our tired limbs. We'll wrap up our second day with a deeply satisfying, long, gradual glide into town. There's a couple of glorious roadside attractions along the way. You won't want to miss these. Hub City. Can't beat it. And our destination this day is right here. You'll all recognize this, I know. This really is downtown Fort Klamath. We're going to camp on our second night right here in Fort Klamath. We'll pitch our tents on the ranch of a third-generation cattleman raising his herd here. And yes, we are indeed buying from him 2,000 steaks for dinner that night. This is the best day this cattle ranch has ever had, I'll tell you that. That's about as good as life gets, is 2,000 showing up right there so you don't have to truck the cattle. So there it is, day 2, Silver Lake to Fort Klamath. This is 81 miles. Now see, if you're doing 81 miles, this is the kind of profile you like to see. So, that's what Klamath Marsh looks like when you put it on a profile, I think. It really is a breathtaking day on a bicycle. You're going to love day 2. All right, on to day 3. There's a little bit of a clue here again in the title. So when last we talked, which was at the closing ceremony of our 2011 ride, way back there in Riddle, I offered, as I traditionally do, a single clue about next year's ride. In 2012, I forecast we would, in a single day, ride higher and ride longer without backtracking than we had ever done before in our 25-year history. So day 3 is the day I was talking about. Day 3 is the day for which I recommend you all begin training tomorrow. We will ride out of Fort Klamath, where even the fences seem to have stories to tell, and we'll take a long, steady warm-up of a morning, as then it turns almost imperceptibly into a genuine, full-on climb. Starting, finally, it is day 3 after all, starting, finally, to feel our strength, to get our legs, we spin on up through the trees, playing peekaboo with the mountains, wondering quite where we're going, while catching occasional glimpses of these cauldrons of canyons that parallel the road. All this labor, all this work, all this sweat, all these tears. Trust me, this is the morning we'll see our first sweat and tears. All this finally is rewarded with this. The climb to the south rim of Crater Lake is indeed one of Oregon's most epic days on a bicycle, and this climb for us is just the start. For riders now will face the first great challenge of our 25th anniversary ride. Some, perhaps many, will choose to gaze upon the lake and, quite contentedly, retreat. Others, the ones who really did train all summer, the ones who really do have ice in their veins, will gaze across that lake at those distant rim rocks, and they'll think, I wonder what the lake looks like from over there. The rim road around Crater Lake, the circumnavigation of the national park, is stunning for one simple reason. In more than 30 miles, it is never flat for more than 300 yards at a time. It is, quite simply, up, down, up, down, up, down, and one of America's great bicycle rides. It affords stunning views of Wizard Island and, not for the faint of heart, the view down over Phantom Ship. And here is where it really gets interesting. For here is when that clear way offered last year comes into play. For you could, of course, continue to climb without backtracking. You could actually go around Crater Lake twice. For those for whom once might not be enough, the descent, I must say, is not without its attractions. It's a thrilling 16-mile plunge down through the forest that affords now spectacular glimpses into the Rogue Gorge before we all enjoy that gradual glide on through the trees into Prospect, where we'll get a warm welcome home from our friends at the high school, the Prospect Cougars. So there it is, day 3. This is Fort Klamath to Prospect. 61, 88, 115, 140. You can pretty much ride as many miles this day as you like. On then to day 4, the long and winding road. Just when you thought you were going to get a day off after all that strenuous work. Today offers seclusion, but of a different kind, as we move now away from that high desert prairie on towards the forested slopes that line the west side of the Cascade Range. The morning begins with a climb up out of Prospect, and then we ride past these high mountain meadows. We'll stop for lunch in Butte Falls. It's always a great community to go back to. It was one of our earliest friends in this part of the world many years ago. We're really looking forward to returning to Butte Falls. And it'll be a hearty lunch that day because we'll be girding up for another major climb in the afternoon as we rise again to visit a series of alpine lakes, all leading us towards the first of the streams that tumble now west toward the Pacific. And then, at last, after all this effort, we glimpse it. The road down off the high desert. And so here, we face the big decision. To descend or not to descend? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the saddle? For the lure, of course, should we indeed decide to descend, the lure is Ashland. The home of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. In 25 years, we have never spent the night in Ashland. The folks in Ashland thought that was long enough. And they offered us a wonderful campsite on the campus of Southern Oregon University. Veterans, again, know, of course, camping on a university is code for green grass. So who could resist? There it is, day 4, Prospect to Ashland, 76 miles. Now, you see, when I talked about that big decision, that lure of the descent, you know, to descend or not to descend, I guarantee there will be people who will ask Jerry if they can have their tent dropped off at the peak there and not go down to Ashland, and you'll understand why in a moment. Day 5. Wait for it. Now, don't get ahead of me, people. Day 5 is our peak experience. Ashland does indeed offer plenty of distractions, so many that we simply had to declare it the layover day of our anniversary tour. So you might begin your day with a stroll in stunning Lithia Park. And then, of course, there's always that traditional siren call of downtown coffee and donuts. But wait, hang on. There's at least one donut fan out here. Before you park your bike for the entire day, remember that there is a truly major lure for bicyclists that beckons, and it beckons right at Ashland's back door. And the lure, naturally, is this: Mount Ashland. So our layover day affords us the opportunity to take on this, one of the classic climbs in all of Oregon. Remember now, longer, harder, higher. So we'll ease out of town to pedal the peaceful grades of that old Siskiyou Highway and then climb those switchbacks up through the shade to emerge finally at Callahan's classic roadside resort. And then another decision, whether to take on Mount Ashland itself, whether to climb the paved road all the way to the ski area that is indeed the very summit of Southern Oregon. It's the kind of day on which, naturally, if you're up there, you're going to want to be looking really cool on your bike. Don't worry, we've got you covered. Here it is, Cycle Oregon gear for 2012 for our anniversary ride. And you'll see full details posted this evening on all the gear. And for those of you, naturally, who wanted to catch a play while in Ashland, don't worry, we've got you covered there too. You'll find, again, instructions this evening on your website on how to reserve your tickets. On Wednesday, on the Elizabethan stage at the Outdoor Theatre, they'll be doing the Merry Wives of Windsor. And on the following night, on Thursday, As You Like It. And I'm delighted to announce tonight that Cycle Oregon riders are guaranteed the first shot at all the seats in the house in the Outdoor Theatre on both nights. So, there it is. This is day 5, Ashland and all its options. It's basically 27 miles, 46 miles, or of course, for the donut fan out there, no miles at all. Yeah. For those who don't feel you're really cycling until you're cycling in the red zone, this is the day we gave them. All right, on to day 6. Remember those folks that we left up on top of the hill above Ashland? It's time to go back and pick them up. Riding the CREST. Time now to turn our backs on all the splendor that is Bear Valley. Time to turn our backs on all of that and to return to the high, dry country. Day 6 begins with another celebrated Southern Oregon climb. This is the ascent of Dead Indian Highway. And as we reach the crest, we'll intersect again with the Pacific Crest Trail as we transition now from the alpine forest back out onto the high desert floor. We'll enjoy this afternoon more stunning views of Mount McLaughlin, and then we'll settle in for a long, smooth afternoon where the road is as flat as it is fast. It is flat, and it is fast, and it is Southern Oregon quirky. Where else but Southern Oregon would you find this astonishing combo platter? A store called Susie's, where Susie's specialties, custom archery and servicing your piano. And she'll even dress your elk on the side. So. And waiting for us at the end of the day is another glorious campsite right there in Moore Park. We're on the outskirts now of Klamath Falls, right on the shores of Klamath Lake. So there it is, day 6, Ashland to Klamath Falls, 65 miles. Now that's what you call a morning on a bicycle right there. Oh. Dead Indian Highway. On then to day 7, Bly and the big blue sky. Friday morning, we'll take one last lingering look at the lake and then bid farewell to Klamath Falls. And early on today, we'll have another great Cycle Oregon experience. We'll be riding the OB&E Woods Rails to Trails path. I mentioned earlier some of these Rails to Trails projects starting to emerge across the strait. This is one of the early existing ones and a terrific ride through the valley. Then we'll head out again onto the open cattle range, all that fertile cropland along the Lost River. Our first major stop that day will be in the town of Bonanza, which many of you know is renowned as the capital of Chile. At Cycle Oregon, we try to support local communities wherever we can, but Ingrid and Tara are still not sure that a chili feast is right for a Cycle Oregon lunch, even on day 7. And then in the afternoon, just to finish in style, we're going to take on one last climb up on over Mount Bly, summit on the pass there, and from there, the pavement on really is as smooth as silk, all the way back into Big Sky Country, all the way back into downtown Bly, where my favorite store really is, the Plum Tuckered Out. So there it is, day 7. That's Klamath Falls to Bly, 64 miles. And just that one perfect little climb for day 7. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen, your Cycle Oregon 2012. Now, for those of you who are keeping score, and I know some of you love to keep score, each year on Cycle Oregon, we sort of, track how many vertical feet, cumulative vertical feet, you sort of do in a week. And years ago, way back in the beginning, somebody sort of said to us, riding Cycle Oregon kind of feels like climbing Mount Everest. And so we started to sort of chart it and look. And every year on our week, we do about 26, 27, 28,000, vertical feet. So it is kind of like climbing Mount Everest. So to give you a perspective on this year's ride, when we said let's turn it up a notch, if you climb every hill on this year's Cycle Oregon tour, you'll be over 40,000 feet. So. And I will, of course, be out in front of you on every one of those. So, in closing, let me just thank you all again for coming out this evening. Thanks to our sponsors, to my co-directors, to all the volunteers. But I think I can safely say, on behalf of all of you, that we'd all like to take a moment tonight just to thank those who are not here with us this evening. Not here, of course, because they're busy out there. They're busy tonight as they were last night, and they will be tomorrow night. They're busy tilling their fields and herding their cattle and riding their fences and felling their trees and raising their kids. And they're the men and women of rural Oregon. For without their astonishing generosity, and indeed without their enduring grace, none of these 25 years would have been possible. So thanks to all of them, thanks to you, and I'll see you on the road.